What would you do if a single touch of your hand could save the life of an alien princess and unknowingly bind your fate to hers forever? Marcus Cole had been a maintenance engineer on the orbital station Horizon 7 for 3 years. And nothing exciting ever happened. Fix a pipe here, rewire a panel there. Occasionally unclog an air filter when someone flushed something they shouldn't have. The most thrilling part of his week was when the mess hall served actual chicken instead of protein paste. And he had long ago accepted that this was his life: quiet, predictable, utterly unremarkable. So when the emergency klaxons started blaring in Corridor B12 on a quiet Tuesday morning, Marcus assumed it was another false alarm. Maybe a sensor glitch or a training drill nobody had remembered to announce. He was wrong, catastrophically, wonderfully, impossibly wrong. The royal procession appeared like a storm through the sterile white hallways. Guards in iridescent armor that seemed to shift colors with every movement, flanking a floating medical pod. Their faces grim beneath crystalline helmets that reflected the harsh station lighting. Marcus had heard whispers about the Valorian royal family. Everyone in the coalition had they were one of the most powerful dynasties in the known galaxy, renowned for their ethereal beauty and mysterious healing abilities that only functioned within their own bloodline. A gift passed down through generations, like crown jewels made of starlight. What he didn't expect was to see them here, in his sector, pushing through with desperate urgency that made his stomach clench with borrowed fear. "Clear the path," one of the guards shouted, but Marcus had already pressed himself flat against the wall, making himself as small as possible, while his heart hammered against his ribs. He watched the procession rush past, catching only glimpses of the figure inside the medical pod. Silver hair splayed across a pillow like spilled moonlight, skin that held a fading luminescence, like a dying star flickering its final farewell to the universe. Something in his chest tightened, an inexplicable pull he couldn't understand, as if an invisible thread was tugging at his soul. And then everything went terribly, beautifully wrong. The lead guard stumbled later. They would discover a loose floor panel that Marcus had been meaning to fix for 3 weeks, but kept forgetting in the monotony of his routine, and the medical pod lurched sideways with a sickening metallic groan. The gravity stabilizers failed. For just a second, a single heartbeat of mechanical failure. But a second was all it took. Marcus didn't think his body moved on pure instinct, survival protocols overriding common sense as he dove forward with arms outstretched, catching the edge of the pod before it could crash against the corridor wall and potentially kill the dying woman inside. His hand touched hers. Just a brush of skin, barely a heartbeat's worth of contact, fingers grazing against fingers in the kind of accidental touch that happens 1,000 times a day between strangers. But the moment Marcus's callous maintenance worker hands connected with the princess's pale skin, something extraordinary happened, something that would rewrite the laws of galactic medicine and change his life forever. Light erupted from the point of contact, not harsh or blinding, but warm, radiating outward like morning sunshine breaking through storm clouds after weeks of rain. It spread across her arm in golden ripples, traveling up her shoulder and washing over her entire body in waves of pure healing energy that made the air hum with power he could feel vibrating in his teeth. The medical monitors, which had been screaming warnings and flatline alerts just moments before, fell suddenly silent, then began to sing an entirely different tune, displaying stable readings, strengthening vitals, systems normalizing one after another in rapid succession. Marcus stumbled backward, staring at his hand as if it belonged to a stranger, as if he had somehow replaced it with someone else's without noticing. What just happened?" he whispered, but no one was listening to him. They were all staring at the pod, at the impossible miracle unfolding before their eyes. The guards had frozen mid-step, like statues carved from disbelief. The medical technicians gaped at their displays, running diagnostic after diagnostic, as if convinced their equipment had malfunctioned. And then Princess Lyria opened her eyes. They were violet deep, swirling violet like galaxies captured and refined into human form, and they locked onto Marcus with an intensity that stole his breath and replaced it with something electric. She sat up slowly, her movements fluid despite having been moments away from death, and examined her own hands with wonder, turning them over and over as if seeing them for the first time. The luminescence in her skin, which had been fading like embers dying in cold ash, now pulsed with renewed strength, painting her features in soft gold that made her look less like a dying princess and more like a living sunrise. Impossible, whispered an older Valorian woman, who swept forward from the back of the procession, her elaborate robes marking her as someone of immense importance, someone who was not accustomed to using that particular word. She grabbed Marcus by the arm, her grip surprisingly strong for her apparent age, and studied him with eyes that seemed to peer through his flesh and bone to examine his very soul. A simple human, healed the crown princess. This cannot be. This should not be possible under any law of biology or physics. Our people understand. I didn't do anything, Marcus stammered, his voice cracking embarrassingly on the last word. I caught the pod and I accidentally touched her, and I swear I don't know what happened. You touched Lyria, the woman interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of accumulated wisdom and authority. No one outside our bloodline should be capable of this healing resonance. We have searched every corner of our empire for someone who could cure her condition, consulted ancient texts written before your species discovered fire, performed rituals older than your planet's history. And yet, here you stand, an unremarkable maintenance worker who accomplished in one accidental touch what our greatest healers could not achieve in 3 years of desperate trying. Princess Lyria rose from the medical pod with the grace of flowing water. And for the first time, Marcus saw her clearly, without the haze of emergency and adrenaline clouding his perception. She was stunning in a way that transcended species' delicate features that reminded him of classical paintings he had seen in Earth museums as a child. A face that balanced strength and gentleness in perfect harmony. Long silver hair cascaded past her shoulders like liquid moonlight, catching the station's artificial lighting and transforming it into something magical. Her pointed ears were the only feature that marked her as distinctly alien, despite her otherwise remarkably human appearance. Elegant and slightly elongated, giving her an otherworldly quality that made Marcus's heart do strange things in his chest. She wore fitted tactical clothing in deep blues and silvers, practical yet elegant, the kind of outfit designed for both diplomatic meetings and emergency evacuations. She moved toward Marcus with curiosity burning in those impossible violet eyes, each step deliberate and purposeful, and he found himself unable to look away. What is your name? Her voice was music and thunder and whispered secrets all at once, resonating somewhere deep in his chest where he kept things he didn't examine too closely. Marcus Cole, he managed, surprised his voice still worked at all. I'm just a maintenance worker. I fix things around the station, environmental systems, power conduits, sometimes the waste recycling units when they back up. I promise you, Your Highness, I have absolutely no idea what I did or how I did it. I was just trying to help, and I don't have any special abilities. And I really think there's been some kind of mistake. Small smile crossed her lips. The kind of smile that suggested she found his rambling panic endearing rather than insulting. And something in Marcus's chest loosened slightly at the sight. You saved my life by accident, she said, her smile growing warmer. That might be the most honest rescue in recorded history. No hidden agenda, no political maneuvering, no expectation of reward, just a man trying to prevent a medical pod from crashing. The older woman Marcus would learn later that she was Grand Matriarch Serafini, Lyria's grandmother, and the true power behind the Valorian throne stepped between them with authority that brooked no argument. This man must be examined, tested, studied. The healing bond is sacred among our people. It doesn't occur by chance or coincidence. The universe does not make such errors, and we must understand exactly what he is. I'm not an error, Marcus said, before he could stop himself, his mouth apparently operating independently from his survival instincts. Then he winced, realizing he had just contradicted one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. But Lyria laughed, a genuine, surprised sound that echoed through the corridor like bells ringing in clear mountain air. He has spirit. I like that considerably. What followed was the strangest week of Marcus Cole's life, and considering he had once been stranded on an asteroid with nothing but a malfunctioning rebreather and 3 protein bars for 17 days. That was saying something significant. The Valorian royal family commandeered an entire section of Horizon 7, transforming it into a makeshift research facility dedicated entirely to understanding how an ordinary human from an unremarkable background had accomplished the impossible. They ran scans that made his bones vibrate and his teeth ache. They drew samples of blood, saliva, hair, skin cells, and things he actively tried not to think about. They interrogated him about his ancestry, his childhood, his dreams, his fears, his favorite foods, anything that might explain why he possessed an ability that should have been genetically impossible. Through it all, through the endless tests and invasive questions and sleepless nights, Lyria was there. She wasn't what Marcus expected from royalty, not even close. Yes, she carried herself with an innate dignity that spoke of generations of noble breeding and rigorous training. But she also asked questions, real, genuine questions about his life, his work, his thoughts on everything from the meaning of existence to the best way to cook pasta. She argued passionately about music and literature with him, introduced him to Valorian poetry that made him cry even though he barely understood the translations, and laughed at his terrible jokes with what seemed like genuine appreciation. She snuck him extra dessert from the officers' mess when the researchers forgot to feed him, appearing at his door with a conspiratorial smile and contraband pastries. She sat with him during the long nights when the tests became overwhelming, telling him stories about her homeworld, a planet called Velora where the forests glowed with natural bioluminescence that responded to emotional resonance, where music could literally be harvested from the wind currents that swept through crystal canyons. "You should hate me," Marcus said one evening as they sat in the observation deck, stars spinning slowly past the enormous windows like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "I'm the reason you're trapped here instead of going home. The reason your grandmother won't stop with these invasive tests. The reason everything has gotten so complicated." Lyria tilted her head, silver hair catching the starlight and gleaming with colors that shouldn't exist. "You're the reason I'm alive, Marcus Cole. 3 solar cycles, 3 of your Earth years I have been dying, fading from a condition our greatest healers could not name or cure, despite all their knowledge and technology. I had accepted my fate, made peace with it, written letters to family members I would never see again. And then you stumbled into my path because of a floor panel you forgot to fix and changed absolutely everything. How could I possibly hate you for that?" Because now they think where he struggled with the word, with the concept that felt too enormous to voice. The Valorians had a concept called the soul bond, a connection between two beings so profound that one could sense the other's emotions across any distance, heal their wounds with a touch, share their very life force in times of crisis. It was considered the highest, most sacred form of partnership in their entire culture, and according to every single test the researchers had conducted, that was exactly what existed between Marcus and Lyria. Soul bonded. Lyria finished for him, her voice gentle but matter-of-fact. "Yes, the evidence is rather overwhelming, isn't it? Every test confirms it. Every scan shows the same resonance patterns that only appear in bonded pairs. My grandmother is terrified and fascinated in equal measure. It's impossible. We met a week ago. I didn't even know your species existed until I started working here. I'm not." He gestured helplessly at himself, at his standard-issue maintenance coveralls and perpetually grease-stained hands that no amount of scrubbing seemed to fully clean. "I'm nobody, Your Highness. I fix toilets and replace light fixtures and patch hull breaches. I'm not the kind of person who ends up soul-bonded to alien princesses. That's not how my life works. Perhaps that's exactly why it works." Lyria reached out and took his hand deliberately this time, with full intention rather than accident, her fingers interlacing with his like they had done this 1,000 times before. The warmth spread between them immediately, that golden light flickering beneath their skin where they touched, visible proof of something neither of them fully understood. "My people believe that the soul bond transcends status, species, even dimensions. It connects beings who complement each other, who need each other, who make each other stronger than either could be alone." I was dying, Marcus, not just physically, but spiritually. My entire life has been arranged, scheduled, predetermined by forces beyond my control. Every decision made for me before I could voice an opinion. Every moment accounted for on schedules written before I was born. I was fading because I had forgotten what it felt like to be genuinely surprised, to experience something unplanned and unexpected and wonderfully chaotic. She squeezed his hand gently, her grip warm and solid and real. "And then you surprised me." Marcus stared at their interlocked fingers, watching the soft glow pulse between them like a heartbeat they shared. It felt right, he realized with startling clarity, more right than anything had felt in years, maybe ever. "I'm scared," he admitted in a whisper. "I don't understand any of this. I don't know how to be what you need me to be. I've never been special or important, or then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time." Lyria's smile was gentle, patient, radiating a confidence he desperately wished he could mirror. That's what partners do, isn't it? That's what soul bonds are for, two people learning how to be more together than they ever were apart. The crisis arrived 3 days later, shattering their fragile peace like glass under a hammer. Grand Matriarch Serafini had been communicating with the Valorian High Council, and their response was catastrophically unfavorable. An alien, particularly a human, a species they considered primitive and unremarkable bonded to the crown princess, was absolutely unacceptable. It threatened the genetic purity of the royal bloodline, the stability of succession that had been maintained for 40 generations, the very foundations of their carefully structured society. They demanded that Lyria return home immediately without Marcus, where they would attempt to sever the bond through ancient rituals that had not been performed in over 3,000 years. They will fail, Serafini said grimly, standing in Lyria's quarters with a holographic communication still flickering behind her like a ghost of bureaucratic disapproval. The soul bond cannot be broken without destroying both participants. That has been proven countless times throughout our history. But they will try regardless. They are proud, and they are afraid, and they would rather risk your death than accept change. That is a dangerous combination. Lyria stood tall, her expression hardening into something fierce that reminded Marcus this was not just the kind-hearted woman who snuck him desserts and told him stories about glowing forests. She was also a princess trained from birth to navigate political warfare and survive assassination attempts. I will not allow them to harm him, grandmother. I don't care what it costs me. I won't let them take him. I know, child. Which is why we must act first. Before they realize we've anticipated their move. The plan was audacious, perhaps even insane. But it was the only option that didn't end with someone dead. Serafini would return to Velora alone, claiming that Lyria required further medical treatment on Horizon 7 while they studied the bond's unique properties. In reality, Lyria and Marcus would board a small transport ship and travel to the neutral world of Sanctuary, where soul-bonded couples were granted automatic asylum under galactic law, regardless of species or political complications. From there, they could negotiate with the High Council from a position of safety rather than vulnerability, forcing them to accept what they could not prevent. You would give up your throne, Marcus said quietly, the enormous weight of it settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. Your family, your homeworld, everything you've known your entire life for a chance at safety with someone you've known for less than 2 weeks. Lyria cupped his face in her hands, her touch igniting that familiar warmth that now felt like coming home after a long journey. I would give it up for a chance at a life that is truly mine to live, she said firmly. The throne was never something I wanted, Marcus. It was something I inherited, a burden I was born into without ever being asked if I could bear it. But you are something I chose. The first thing in my entire existence I have ever truly chosen for myself. They ran. The transport was small, fast, and unmarked, provided by contacts Serafini had quietly cultivated over centuries of subtle rebellion against the restrictive traditions of her own culture. Marcus piloted while Lyria navigated, their bond allowing them to communicate without words, each somehow knowing instinctively what the other needed before they consciously needed it. 3 council ships pursued them across 2 star systems, their advanced weapons systems painting targeting solutions on the transport's hull. Twice they nearly ran out of fuel, coasting on fumes through asteroid fields. Once, a tracking missile came so close, Marcus swore he could see its guidance fins through the viewport before Lyria's quick thinking disabled it with an electromagnetic pulse that temporarily fried half their own systems. They arrived at Sanctuary just as the transport's engines finally gave out, sputtering and dying with a mechanical groan of exhausted machinery. The neutral world was everything Marcus had dreamed of during those terrifying days of fleeing a planet where beings from across the galaxy came to escape the rigid systems of their homeworlds and build new lives. Here, soul bonds were honored and celebrated. Here, love was not considered a weakness or a political liability. Here, for the first time, in what felt like forever, Marcus and Lyria could simply exist together without constantly looking over their shoulders. It took 6 months for the negotiations to finally conclude. The Valorian High Council was eventually forced to acknowledge, publicly and officially, that they could not break the soul bond without killing their crown princess, a public relations catastrophe they could not afford when other species were watching and judging. In the end, they offered a compromise, Lyria would retain her title and her place in the line of succession, but her eventual rule would be shared with Marcus as her official consort. Their children, should they choose to have any, would inherit both human adaptability and Valorian healing abilities, potentially creating a dynasty stronger than any that had come before. Marcus stood on the balcony of their new residence on Sanctuary, watching the twin suns set over an ocean of liquid crystal that reflected colors impossible on Earth. When Lyria joined him, she wrapped her arms around him from behind, her cheek resting against his shoulder, her warmth seeping into his back, and for a long peaceful moment, neither of them spoke. "Any regrets?" she finally asked softly. He thought about his old life, the endless identical corridors of Horizon 7, the broken pipes and faulty wiring, the protein-paced dinners and the lonely nights staring at stars he never thought he'd touch. Then he thought about the warmth in his chest, the constant, gentle presence of their bond, the knowledge that he would never face anything alone again. "Not a single one," he said honestly. Lyria smiled against his shoulder. "Good, because I should tell you my grandmother is arriving next week. She wants to discuss wedding traditions. Valorian ceremonies can last up to 3 days and involve harmonic singing that may permanently damage human eardrums if you don't wear proper protection." Marcus groaned, but he was laughing. "I survived missile attacks and council politics and nearly starving in deep space. I think I can handle a wedding." "We shall see," Lyria said, her violet eyes twinkling with mischief. "I haven't told you about the ritual dancing yet, or the traditional fasting, or the ceremonial combat." And as the twin suns dipped below the crystal sea, painting the sky in impossible shades of gold and rose and violet, Marcus Cole reflected on the beautiful absurdity of fate, how a loose floor panel, a stumble, a single accidental touch had rewritten the course of his entire existence and given him something he never knew he was missing. Sometimes, if you're very lucky and very open to possibilities, the universe really does know what it's doing.